Namashri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Surai Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Last time we were discussing Swamiji's work in England, and there are some other points regarding this work. This work, Swamiji in the beginning thought that it is not, you see, it is just an explorative thing. He did not know England, etc. But in the long run, in this short period, it so happened that he reaped a great harvest in this short time. What was not, you see, America he had spent already from 1893, we are now in 1895. So almost 18 months here worked already, you see. There he got many friends, surely, in Detroit one, in Chicago one, in New York, two families, close friends, and also one your lady who would stand by his work for almost 50 years. In the three continents he would work, I'm meaning Miss MacLeod. But in England, in short time, he also got something. That is the most wonderful thing about his work in England. And I have told you that the very first talk he gave was in Maidenhead, and that was on love, naturally, because the book he was working on, Inquiry into this divine love, so that was occupying his mind. And what he ended the talk with something which became a general note of his message. That means God is what he is, but views about him vary according to your own evolution, according to the evolution of the nation. That is one thing. And the highest thing he says that it is love. That is the greatest idea about God. And so a man who can manifest this love everywhere in every moment, they say he has already reached the goal. There is a poem composed by him in Bengali, Brahma hote Kit Paramanu Sarvabhute Shei Premamoy Sharira Mon Pran Arpan Karasake Shabar Pai. That means from Brahma down to the lowest creature, everywhere in all beings, it is this God of love. So you offer your body, your mind, your vital energy, everything at the feet of this. That means lovingly you serve all creatures, that is worshipping God. So with this theme he ended it, and then he gave also to Westminster Gazette correspondent a message which shows his mission in life. He says that I propound a philosophy which can serve as a basis to every possible religious system in the world. And my attitude towards all of them is one of extreme sympathy. My teaching is antagonistic to none. I direct my attention to the individual to make him strong, to teach him that he himself is divine. And I call upon men, of course, within bracket you should also add women, to make themselves conscious of this divinity within. This is really the ideal conscious or unconscious, of every religion. This idea is reflected in his oft-quoted talk during the Raja Yoga classes. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more of them, and be free. This is the whole of religion. This ideal that is there is divinity within and you must work it out. All other things are secondary. All other things in religion, you may read scriptures, you may do rituals, you may do prayers, but everything is secondary. That means the main thing is this. You are basically divine and you have to manifest this divinity. And when you manifest it, you are always conscious about it. That is also true. And then he says that my teaching is my own interpretation of our ancient books in the light which my master shed upon them. This point he would elaborate in Belur Math rules, which were dictated by him a few years later. He says that there is a group of people who think that the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna should be the only text which his followers should go through. But he differed from it. He said, no, the ancient scriptures, Shastras, they should be these scriptures to be read. Only that they have to be interpreted in the light of the life and message of Sri Ramakrishna. He says that no one, it is Hindu Shastras highly ramified, and if you go into them without such a light, then you will be certainly confused because totally contradictory things are there. Now, these contradictory things are there because in Hinduism, the paths are so many. So there is this, what they call Avastha Adhikari doctrine. Avastha means at what stage of evolution you are. This is, and what is your fitness? That is Adhikari. So Avastha and Adhikari, so according to that, the paths vary. And also certain times the messages vary. So one must remember this, and this we can understand in the light of Sri Ramakrishna's life and message, because he fathomed all of them. He went to lanes and by lanes of Hinduism. Not only the major paths, also the minor sects. He used to know very well these sects, their practices, and many of them were followed by him. And also he had some training under a proper guru in a branch of Sufism, and he practiced Christianity in his own way, because the essence of Christianity is the divinity of Christ. He had it when he looked at the Madonna in the garden house of a gentleman very near the temple premises. And then immediately after that, he meditated deeply on Christ for 3 days. And at the end of the third day, he again saw Jesus Christ and his apostles. And Jesus Christ slowly and slowly came towards him and merged within him. And he was convinced throughout his life thereafter that Jesus was a divine incarnation. Now, you see, in one of the talks given by Swamiji, there was one gentleman, Mr. Desai, who gives his impression in the following words. I heard the first lecture at Princess Hall with Mrs. Ingal. That was the first time I saw the commanding figure of the great Swami. He looked more like an Indian prince than a sadhu. He had a Bhagwa Patka, and that means the turban. And the turban, ochre colored turban on his head. He electrified the audience by his grand and powerful oratory. The next day, the report appeared in the papers that he was the next Indian after Keshav Chandra Sen, who had surprised the English audience by his magnificent oratory. He spoke on Vedanta. His large eyes were rolling like anything, and there was such an animation about him that it passeth description. After the meeting was over, the Swami took off his turban and put on a huge and deep Kashmiri cap, looking like a big Persian hat. This is his impression of Mr. Desai. And then you see the Gazette published on the next day after his talk, that means we are in 23rd of October. Many things in this big report, they are saying that lecture was the most fearless and eloquent exposition of the pantheistic philosophy of Vedanta school, and the Swami seems to have incorporated into his system a good deal also of the moral element of the yoga school. As the closing passage of his lecture presented in a modified form, not the advocacy of mortification, which is the leading feature of the latter school, but the renunciation of all so-called material comforts and blessings. So this renunciation was a note. He again and again harps upon it, and it should be noted that without renunciation, you may have flash of wisdom, but it will not stay with you. It will not stay with you. You will be just an ordinary man with all these flashes of wisdom if renunciation is not there. The opening passages of the lecture were a review of the rise of the grosser form of materialism in the beginning of the present century. That means we are in 19th century. And the later development of the various forms of metaphysical thought, which for a time swept materialism away. From this, he passed on to discuss the origin and nature of knowledge. In some respects, his views on this point were almost a statement of pure fictism. This Fichte, who was a German philosopher, fictism. But they were expressed in language, and they embodied illustrations and made admissions which the German transcendentalist would have used. He admitted there was a gross material world outside, but he confessed that he did not know what matter was. Because matter means, you see, something is coming to your perception and conception through the senses and the mind, sense organs. And these sense organs are often deceptive. You may think that I have seen it like this, etc., but it is not always like this. Of course, you know it that if you bring a microscope, you see things in another light, for example, because the microscope itself is another indriya, powerful indriya, with which you see things in another way. So he said that he did not know what matter was. He asserted that mind was a finer matter, and that behind was the soul of man, which was immovable, fixed, before which outward objects passed as it were in a procession, which was without beginning or without end. In other words, which was eternal, and finally, which was God. Anything eternal is God. Anything eternal is God. And whatever is non-eternal is also God, but it is the shadow of God. There is only one soul in the universe, he said. There is no you or me. All varieties merged in the absolute unity, the one infinite existence, God. From this, of course, followed the immortality of the soul and something like the transmigration of souls towards higher manifestations of perfection. As already stated, his peroration of 20 minutes was a statement of doctrine of renunciation, in the course of which he made some disparaging criticism of on the work that factories, engines, and inventions and books were doing for man, compared with half a dozen words spoken by Buddha or Jesus. Of course, because what should I say, this revolution, what is called the Industrial Revolution, it brought some goods to the world, because you see it brought comfort to a section of humanity, but at a great expense. So expenses were the outside nature that was exploited mercilessly, and the poorer section of humanity, they were also exploited. People were brought from their natural habitations, villages, gathered in slums in the cities, and made to work in factories. So the harm it did, you see, is enormous to nature and to humanity also. One should not see the one side only, the end product in factories. We have already talked about his idea, which he was developing even in America, which was coming to him again and again, this idea of universal religion. Because the underlying principles of all religions resembled one another. And that means what you are wanting, that is almost the same. Only some other things are varying according to the evolution of wisdom in that special community, and other things, you see, rituals which go along with it. One thing you see was that there was one gentleman who is Canon Wilberforce, who was in his class, and who, even it is said that he invited Swamiji to his home. So in that way, it was see, because he was a very influential man in the Anglican Church. So such a man befriending Swamiji, it is a kind of endorsement of a powerful section of the English society. So that was something, you see, this Wilberforce. So Swamiji would write to Alberta Sturge, in your country, America, Alberta, the Vedantic thought was introduced in the beginning by ignorant cranks, and one has to work his way through the difficulties created by such introductions. Because Vedanta was introduced by whom? By transcendentalists, first of all, by a few poets who had the Indian wisdom percolated to them through various sources. So their knowledge was sketchy, and whatever they learned, they fell in love with. And you may have noticed that only a few men or women of the upper classes ever joined my classes in America. Again, in America, the upper classes, being the rich, their whole time is spent in enjoying their wealth and imitating the Europeans. On the other hand, in England, the Vedantic ideas have been introduced by the most learned men in the country. And there are a large number among the upper classes in England who are very thoughtful. So you'll be astonished to hear that I found my grounds all prepared. This is how he sums up, you see, after a few weeks stay in England. Then he said the English people laughed and laughed when I told them about my experience with the Presbyterians and other fanatics and my receptions in hotels, etc., because of racial confusion. In America, my teachings are thought to be queer by the Methodist and Presbyterian aristocracy. In England, it is the highest philosophy to the English church aristocracy. So there is something, even you see, though it is true that the English people in a very nice way sucked our country materially, but it is also true that the first Governor General, he wrote the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. That means there was a reception. It took, if you look at the Muslims and take 1192 as the beginning of the Muslim power in India, it was only around 1650 that a Mughal prince began to look at the Upanishads and began to translate it. So there's a long, you see, in between there is no other Muslim who, you see, had any favorable, sympathetic idea about these teachings, high teachings, you see. So there is a difference, there is a difference. He writes also to Mary Hale in Chicago that I found that those fellows such as Land, a Christian missionary, etc., came over from England to attack me were nowhere. Their existence is simply ignored by the English people. None but a person belonging to the English church is thought to be genteel. Again, some of the best men of England belonging to the English church and some of the highest in position and fame became my truest friends. That means he is very much convinced about the evolution of the English people. Does that mean that the whole English race has become receptive of Vedanta? It means a section, a powerful section has become. It is always like that. In a society when, for example, when in Bengal, for example, when Brahmins were talking of reforms in the religion, they attracted only you see, a section of Bengalis. But this section was powerful. They were the leaders in everything. They were writing magazines, they were writing newspapers, they were giving lectures, they were holding books, you see, they are conferring with the Britishers about India's condition. So they are the most powerful, though they are a handful. So in all countries, we must remember that those who are receptive to higher ideas, you should not imagine that the whole country has become converted. This you must note. Many people of education and rank, amongst them not a few clergymen, told me that the conquest of Rome by Greece was being reenacted in England. Conquest of Rome by Greece means Rome accepting many of the Greek ideas, especially architecture, etc. That is the conquest of Rome by Greece. So here it was also a cultural conquest of England by, which was again Swamiji's one of the goal. He was saying that this Vedanta must conquer. So he was happy. Then we must note that Lord Ripon, who was the ex-viceroy of India, when Swamiji was came to Sri Ramakrishna and was struggling in his path, questioning him, doubting him, accepting one part and not accepting everything. At that time, Lord Ripon was the viceroy of India. This Lord Ripon, among all the viceroys, was the most sympathetic to the Indian cause. So much so that in Madras they used to call him our father, Ripan. So this Ripan and Madam Ripan was there when Swamiji was, and we shall see very soon that one of the important classes, though it did not attract is a huge gathering because it was a highly selected gathering, selected on the basis of people who are not so much willing to believe. That was the criterion. So it was a small group, but in that group, Madam Ripan, that means the ex-first lady, was sitting next to Swamiji and questioning him from time to time. So we shall see it very soon. So it was, the date was November 10 when this has happened. Some 15 or 16 people were there in the room, and Miss Margaret Noble was one of the listeners. She was a skeptic, very intellectual, very receptive in her own manner, artistically sensitive, and coming from a family who have fought for their country, that means Ireland. And so there was much idealism also in the Margaret Noble. She writes, "We are but 15 or 16 guests, intimate friends, many of us, and he sat amongst us in his crimson robe and girdle, as one bringing us news from a far land, with a curious habit of saying now and again Shiva, Shiva, and wearing that look of mingled gentleness and loftiness that one sees on the faces of those who live much in meditation. And that look, perhaps, that Raphael has painted for us on the brow of the Sistine Child. Brow of the Sistine Child, this sculpture in Vatican. He chanted Sanskrit verses for them, thrilling them with those wonderful Eastern tones, which they found at once so reminiscent of and yet so different from the Gregorian music of our own churches. Then what did she learn actually there? As I've said that Sister Nivedita does not say that Lady Ripan was there, but from the descriptions she gives, it is certain that it was the ex-first lady of India, Lady Ripan, who was seated to the left of the Swamiji and time to time asking him questions. The first thing was that her first, your reaction was that all that he had said, she had already heard them. So there was nothing new in it. But yet there was something new, because he told them that both the body and the mind are regarded by Hindus as moved and dominated by a third called the self. This is not so clear to an ordinary Christian. And then he insisted on the word realization. This is the crux. It is not in doctrines, it is in realization. Realization means having a deep and convincing experience. That is the meaning of realization, means an experience. Experience which changes your life forever. And then he said also that there is an infinite power of man. That means the power which is dwelling in the system of human being. It is really infinite because it is that power is divine. And he harped that the one message of all religions to lie in the call to renunciation. Though there are religions we know who do not say so. But it is also true that all higher religions, that is, people who are regarded as the true masters in the domain of mind, and they're all men and women of renunciation. And it was also a surprise to a Christian when he mentioned that the desire to reach heaven was regarded in India by the most religious people as a little vulgar. That it is not a very high doctrine. It is not a very high goal. So these things she learned. Now let us have a look at, you see, in Europe, for example, the Romantic poets, they have sung about the presence of God in nature. For example, Shelley in his Adonais, he writes, "The one remains, the many change and pass. Heaven's light forever shines, earth's shadows fly. Life, like a dome of many-colored glass, stains the white radiance of eternity, until death tramples it to fragments. Die if thou wouldst be with that which thou dost seek. Follow where all is fled. Rome's azure sky, flowers, ruins, statues, music, words are weak. The glory they transfuse with fitting truth to speak." This is a quote from Shelley's. Now, should we think that Shelley attained to Vedantic truth? Because he is talking about, you see, the one remains, the many change and pass. It is a wisdom which comes to him in a moment of bereavement, because this whole poem was written because he got a shock from the news of the death of Keats, who died of tuberculosis in Rome at the age of 25. And he was himself 29 years old. No, it is not. Because if you look at Shelley's life, it is tossed by wild libido. And in spite of his poetic genius, he was almost on the verge of madness. Such a man cannot hold, say, Vedantic truth. It may come to him in flashes, but you see, many of the Romantic poets talked about presence of God in nature. But none of them, you see, unless, as Swamiji has explained, unless your body and mind, they're not trained and you are not grilled in the path of renunciation, you cannot hold this truth. It may come to it in flashes. So that is the difference, first of all. Then the other thing is this, that Immanuel Kant had declared that the very structure of the human mind, with its built-in lens of time and space, was itself the many-colored glass, unavoidably distorting the real world, the thing itself, of which nothing at all could logically be known or said. Yes, nothing logically known or said, because you see, it is the one thing which cannot be sufficiently described. Yet, the Vedantists have you see, tried to describe it as far as possible, especially not only as Sat and Ananda, but the main thing is Chit. Chit, which is the clue to awareness. This awareness is divine, because this is not the ordinary awareness. You see, this is Chit is, it can be used for empirical use, but it is not. It is something like, for example, you have made a big fire of woods, and the woods have been consumed by the fire. Now, beneath the ashes, the fire remains for a long time. This fire is able to burn, but it is not burning. It has the capacity to. It is something like that. So this chit is not the awareness of a particular object. It is a capacity to, you say, provoke awareness, which is there, which is divine, which is a part of this Brahman. This is called chit. To Hegel, the finite world was in process of becoming the infinite, whereas to Swamiji, as the illusory veil of finitude grows finer and yet finer, the light behind shines forth, for it is its nature to shine. So this world cannot reflect totally that truth. Whereas to Hegel, he thought that it is evolution, is it gradually is it through evolution it will shine more. Now only your Schopenhauer, who took inspiration from the Upanishads, he would say, if we turn our glances from our needy and embarrassed condition to those who have overcome the world, we shall see that peace which passeth understanding, that perfect calm of the spirit, that deep rest, that inviolable confidence and serenity, only knowledge remains, the will by which he meant a blind and divine cosmic force has vanished. Thereby, Schopenhauer comes very near the mark, you see, of the Vedantic truth. So you see, so you have the great souls like Carlyle, for example, who says that know of a truth that only the time shadows have perished and are perishable. The real being of whatever was and whatever is and whatever will be is even now and forever. This is really a Vedantic truth. And of our earthly lives, he wrote, they are dust and shadow, a shadow system gathered round me, wherein through some moments or years, the divine essence is to be revealed in the flesh. And Emerson, who was a clergy and who gave up his job saying that he cannot continue teaching untruth to the people, and was inspired by Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads in whatever imperfect translations they could have it. He wrote, we see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole of which these are the shining parts is the soul. It is not only the soul, though it is nice to hear this, but the real soul is beyond this, you see, beyond this. It is not only the whole cosmos. Cosmos itself is a shadow of this immaterial thing. And in England, there was another thing, that there was this a South Place chapel where Hindu and Buddhist scriptures were regularly read at the Sunday services. I mean, these high ideals were a part of the section already of the English people. So in that condition, Swamiji went, though he went at a time when there was a backlash against your theosophy because of all this magic, etc., that they were doing, and so that is also true. So we leave it here, and if you have any questions you may raise, we shall go to meditation afterwards.
No questions have come in, Swamiji.
Yes.
But I would like to have one question.
Yes.
During the stay of Swamiji in Paris.
Yes.
So that is Swami Vivekananda and the Duke of Richelieu. I just would like to read it out.
Yes.
On the eve of Vivekananda's departure from Paris, the
Yes.
Swami asked the Duke if he would renounce the world and become his disciple.
Yes.
The Duke wanted to know what he would gain in return for such a renunciation,
Yes.
and the Swami said, "I shall give you the desire for death."
Yes.
When asked to explain, the Swami declared that he would give the Duke such a state of mind that when confronted by death, he would laugh at it.
Yes.
But the Duke preferred to pursue a worldly career, though he cherished a lifelong devotion to Swami Vivekananda.
Yes.
So my question is, what was Swamiji actually meaning by this? That he would...
See, when you know the truth, you see, really know the truth, then you are, normally people are afraid of death. Why? One thing is, of course, death normally, you see, accompanies some physical pain. But their main problem is the fear of annihilation and fear of losing. They possessed many things, and suddenly their grip over those things are going away. If you have come face to face with the truth, all these things will vanish. You do not possess anything. And
so does it mean, Swamiji?
that is not only that, you know that your essence is divine. So you are not losing anything. Rather, you see, there is a big chance that the pain which is accompanying you in various degrees because you are embodied, this embodiment will go away and you will be completely released. So this is an assurance.
So does it mean that Swamiji could have given the Duke a kind of Brahmajnana?
Yes, surely. Such
So
a
that
man,
would
you
have
see,
been a gift, not that
yes,
he would have worked on it by himself.
you see, worked on him to see. So you see, pasparshayan daya karena te kamini kanchana mukta rikta sadhya babhuvur bhuya Ramakrishna. So when a great soul showers his blessing on someone, it itself is give you a great boost. You see, not only in life, that you see that link remains with you and comes to your help in death, in the moment of death. So it is a great thing. It is not only helping you in life, it is coming to you at the moment of your passing away to help you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yes.
So no more questions are there. So I guess we can continue with our meditation topics.
Yes. I should say that we shall meditate upon what you see startled Nivedita. You see, Nivedita, as I have said, in the first place, she thought that nothing new has been heard. Then she began to ponder that this man in 1 hour could sum up all the great ideas she had heard from different sources. So that must be great, you see, and of course, he presented something new. Let us first, you see, think of, you see, the first thing which moved her. That means both body and mind are tools in the hands of the self. Let this be our subject of meditation. These are both the body and the mind. They are tools. There is a self beyond that. So let us meditate on it. Next subject of meditation will be this realization versus faith. Normally faith, you see, whether we understand it or not, is something like a prop, which is a sinking prop. That means on a prop, you see, you rely on a prop for support, that it will not, you see, but it's a sinking prop. So faith, normally faith is like that, because at times of big crisis, normally this ordinary faith fails. If you can withstand with your faith, then your faith is strong, and then it is worth something. You have attained at least an amount of an iota of spirituality, because the test is in your great your at times of bereavement, at times of a monetary loss, or at times of a loss of the social status, in times when you are approaching death. These are the times for test. So even if that time your faith is there, that means it is a strong faith and it is worth having it. And now this, as Swamiji is, you see the difference between, because the faith is originally, it seems to be holy, but it is whole-y. There are holes in it. So, so that is why it does that. So this differentiation between a realization and a faith, that should be our, realization means having an experience. For example, the great leaders, you look at those who know the history of religious movement of 19th century India. I am talking about the great movement was the Brahmo Samaj. They had everything. They had organization, they had books. Some of them were rich. Many of them were scholarly. They had many ideas of reform. They had buildings. You see, they have rules, everything, but none of them had this realization. And you see, they did not even thought that it was important. So that is our point. Next point is realization versus faith. Next, your subject of meditation will be Swamiji's teaching that whenever you think that you are not God, great terror will surround you. And as soon as you think that I am He, I am God, etc., great peace and serenity will come to you. Let us think of this. Now, one thing must be understood, that when you say that I am He, Soham, it does not mean the ordinary I. You have to take away your body, your mind, your vital organs, your vital energy, everything you take out, and then what remains, that is divine. All other things are perishable. That divine, that is your essence. Let us meditate upon this, that Swamiji taught, this idea of Tattvamasi or Soham. Okay, thank you.